The morning alarm buzzed at exactly 6:30 in the morning at Kensington Palace. Prince William rolled over in bed and reached for his phone to turn off the sound. The gray London sky outside their bedroom window matched the heavy feeling in his chest. Today was the day they would finally get the test results for their youngest son, Louis, for 3 months. Now the little boy had been experiencing strange symptoms that worried both William and Kate more than they could express to anyone. Kate was already awake, sitting on the edge of their bed. Her long brown hair fell around her shoulders as she stared out the window. She had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured Louis looking tired and pale during dinner the previous evening. The 6-year-old boy, who was usually full of energy and laughter, had been quiet lately. He complained about feeling tired all the time, and sometimes he would get dizzy when he stood up. Too quickly, William got out of bed and walked over to Kate. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. She looked up at him with worried eyes that were already red from holding back tears. They had been married for over 12 years now, and he could read every expression on her face. This morning, her face showed pure fear, mixed with the kind of exhaustion that comes from weeks of worry. The royal couple had tried to keep their concerns private. They could not let the public know that something might be seriously wrong with one of their children. The British people loved their family, and any news about Louis being sick would create a media storm that would make everything worse for everyone involved. So they had been carrying this burden alone together while trying to act normal in front of their other 2 children. George and Charlotte. Kate stood up and walked to their private bathroom to start getting ready for the day. William could hear the water running as she washed her face. He knew she was probably crying in there, where he could not see her. That was how Kate dealt with stress. She would hold herself together in front of everyone else and then find private moments to let her emotions out. The symptoms had started small about 3 months ago. Louis had complained about being more tired than usual after school. At first, William and Kate thought it was just normal childhood tiredness. Maybe he was going through a growth spurt, or maybe he needed to go to bed earlier. But then other things started happening that made them realize something was not right. Louis would get out of breath. When he played with his brother and sister in the palace gardens, he used to run around for hours without getting tired, but now he would need to sit down and rest after just a few minutes. His appetite had also changed. The little boy who used to eat everything on his plate and ask for seconds was now picking at his food and leaving most of it uneaten. The most frightening symptom had happened. 2 weeks ago during breakfast, Louis had stood up from the table to get a glass of water and suddenly collapsed to the floor. Kate had screamed and rushed to him while William called for the palace doctor. Louis had been unconscious for almost a full minute before he woke up confused and scared. The palace doctor had examined him immediately and recommended that they take him to see specialists at the Children's Hospital in London. Since that day, William and Kate had been living in a constant state of anxiety. They had taken Louis to 3 different doctors and specialists. Each appointment involved more tests and more waiting for results. Blood tests, heart monitors, brain scans, and examinations that seemed to go on forever. Louis had been so brave through all of it, but William could see the fear in his son's eyes. Every time they walked into another medical office, the doctors had been professional, but not very reassuring. They spoke in medical terms that William and Kate did not fully understand. Words like genetic testing and rare conditions and further investigation. Each conversation with the doctor left them with more questions than answers. The waiting was the hardest part. Waiting for test results, waiting for phone calls, waiting to know if their little boy was going to be okay. William walked to their bedroom window and looked out at the palace grounds. The morning staff was already starting their daily routines. Gardeners were working on the flower beds, and security guards were walking their usual paths. Life at the palace continued as normal, while his family was falling apart with worry on. The inside Kate came out of the bathroom dressed in a simple blue dress. She had put on makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes, but William could still see the strain on her face. She sat down at her dressing table and started brushing her hair with slow mechanical movements. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she kept glancing at her phone waiting for it to ring. Dr. Peterson was supposed to call them at 9 o'clock this morning with Louis's latest test results. These were the most important tests yet. the genetic screening that would tell them if their son had inherited some kind of serious medical condition. William had researched everything he could find online about the symptoms Louis was experiencing. Most of what he found was scary, and he wished he had never looked it up. The palace was quiet this early in the morning. George and Charlotte were still sleeping and would not wake up for another hour. Louis was also still asleep in his room down the hall. William wanted to go check on him, but he did not want to wake the boy if he was getting good rest. Sleep seemed to be one of the few things that made Louis feel better lately. Kate finished brushing her hair and turned to look at William. Her eyes were filled with tears that she was trying hard not to let fall. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. William walked over to her and pulled her into his arms. They held each other tight without speaking. Both of them were thinking the same thing, but neither wanted to say it out loud. What if the test results showed something terrible? What if their little boy had something seriously wrong with him that could not be fixed? The clock on their bedroom wall ticked loudly in the silence. 8:15 in the morning. 45 more minutes until the phone call that would change everything. For their family? At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, William's phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet palace morning like a knife. Both William and Kate jumped at the noise even though they had been waiting for this call. Kate grabbed William's arm as he reached for the phone with a shaking hand. The caller ID showed Dr. Peterson's name, and William took a deep breath before answering. Dr. Peterson's voice was serious and professional as always. He asked William and Kate to come to his office as soon as possible to discuss Louis's test results in person. The doctor would not give them any information over the phone, which made William's heart sink. In his experience, doctors only insisted on face-to-face meetings when they had bad news to deliver. William agreed to meet at the hospital in 1 hour and hung up the phone. Kate looked at William with wide, frightened eyes. She did not need to ask what the doctor had said. William's expression told her everything she needed to know. The news was not going to be good. They both sat in silence for several minutes, trying to prepare themselves for whatever they were about to learn about their son's condition. William called his private secretary to cancel all his appointments for the day. Kate did the same. They would need to arrange for someone to watch George and Charlotte while they went to the hospital. Kate's mother, Carol, agreed to come to the palace right away when Kate called her. She could hear the worry in her daughter's voice and did not ask any questions. She simply said she would be there in 30 minutes. Getting dressed felt like an impossible task. William put on a dark suit, but his hands were shaking so badly he could barely button his shirt. Kate changed clothes 3 times before settling on a black dress and cardigan. Everything felt wrong, and nothing seemed appropriate for receiving potentially devastating news about their child. They were used to dressing for official events and public appearances, but this was different. This was personal and terrifying. Louis woke up just as they were getting ready to leave. He appeared in their bedroom doorway in his pajamas, looking small and sleepy. His face was pale, and there were dark circles under his eyes that seemed to have gotten worse overnight. Kate's heart broke, seeing her little boy looking so tired and fragile. She knelt down and hugged him close, breathing in his familiar scent of children's shampoo and sleep. Louis asked where his parents were going so early in the morning. William told him they had an important meeting, but would be back soon. The little boy nodded and asked if he could have pancakes for breakfast. Kate promised that Grandma Carol would make his favorite breakfast when she arrived. Louis smiled for the first time in days, and Kate had to turn away to hide her tears. George and Charlotte were also awake now and running around getting ready for school. The palace was filled with the normal sounds of a busy morning, but everything felt different to William and Kate. They were going through the motions of a regular day while their world was potentially about to fall apart. William helped George find his school books while Kate braided Charlotte's hair. These simple parenting tasks felt precious now because they did not know what the future would hold. Carol arrived at the palace exactly 30 minutes after Kate had called her. She took one look at her daughter's face and immediately pulled her into a warm hug. Carol did not ask for details, but assured Kate that she would take good care of all 3 children while their parents were away. She promised to keep everything normal and fun so the children would not worry. The drive to the hospital felt like the longest journey of William's life. London traffic was heavy as usual, but today every red light and slow-moving car felt like torture. Kate sat silently in the passenger seat, staring out the window. She was trying to prepare herself mentally for whatever Dr. Peterson was going to tell them, but her mind kept going to the worst possible scenarios. William reached over and took Kate's hand. Her fingers were ice cold despite the warm morning. He squeezed gently, and she looked at him with tears in her eyes. They had been through many difficult times together over the years, but nothing had prepared them for this kind of fear. The fear that something might be seriously wrong with one of their children was unlike anything they had ever experienced. They arrived at the children's hospital and were escorted through a private entrance to avoid any media attention. The hospital. Corridors smelled of disinfectant, and the floors squeaked under their shoes as they walked to Dr. Peterson's office. Kate noticed other families in the waiting areas. Some looked worried like them, while others looked relieved. She wondered which group they would belong to after their meeting. Dr. Peterson's office was small and cramped with medical books lining the walls. The doctor was a kind man in his 50s who had been treating royal family members for over 20 years. Invited William and Kate to sit down in the chairs across from his desk. The manila folder containing Lewis's test results sat closed on the desk between them. Dr. Peterson opened the folder and began speaking in his careful professional voice. He explained that the genetic testing had revealed some concerning findings. Louis had tested positive for a rare inherited condition that affected his blood and immune system. The condition was progressive, which meant it would get worse over time without proper treatment. The doctor used medical terms that were difficult to understand, but the basic message was clear. Their 6-year-old son had a serious genetic disease. Kate felt the room spinning around her as the doctor continued explaining the diagnosis. William asked questions about treatment options and long-term prognosis, but the answers were not encouraging. The condition was very rare, and there were limited treatment options available. Some children responded well to certain medications, while others did not. There was no way to predict how Lewis would respond until they tried different treatments. The worst part was learning that the condition was hereditary. Either William or Kate had passed this genetic mutation to their son without knowing they carried it. The guilt hit Kate like a physical blow. She had given her child a disease that could potentially shorten his life or cause him years of suffering. William felt the same crushing guilt, even though the doctor assured them that neither parent was to blame for carrying unknown genetic traits. Dr. Peterson scheduled Louis to start treatment the following week. The little boy would need to come to the hospital several times a week for medications and monitoring. Side effects of the treatment could be difficult, and there was no guarantee that it would work. William and Kate left the hospital feeling devastated and overwhelmed with information they never wanted to know. The drive back to Kensington Palace from the hospital was silent, except for the sound of Kate's quiet crying. William gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The words from Dr. Peterson kept repeating in his mind like, a broken record, rare genetic condition, progressive disease, limited treatment options, no guarantee of success. Each phrase felt like a hammer blow to his heart. Kate stared out the passenger window, watching London pass by in a blur. Normal people were going about their normal lives, while her world had completely changed in the space of 1 hour. She saw mothers pushing strollers and children playing in parks, and wondered if any of them knew how lucky they were to have healthy children. The guilt was eating her alive. Somewhere in her DNA was a genetic mistake that she had passed to her innocent little boy. When they arrived back at the palace, Kate went straight to Lewis's room. She found him playing with his toy cars on the bedroom floor while Carol sat nearby. Reading a book? Louis looked up when his mother entered and smiled his sweet 6-year-old smile. Kate had to bite her lip to keep from breaking down completely. How could this beautiful, healthy-looking child have such a serious disease hiding inside his small body? Louis ran to Kate and hugged her legs, asking if she had missed him while she was gone. Kate picked him up and held him close, feeling how light and fragile he seemed in her arms. She told him she had missed him very much and asked what he had been doing with Grandma. Louis chattered happily about the pancakes they had made and the games they had played. His normal, cheerful personality made Kate's heart break even more. William appeared in the doorway looking exhausted and older than his 40 years. Kate could see he was struggling just as much as she was to act normal in front of their son. They both knew they would have to tell the children something eventually, but not today. Today they needed time to process this devastating news themselves. Before they could help their children understand it, Carol looked at William and Kate's faces and immediately understood that the news had been terrible. She quietly suggested that she'd take all three children to the park for the afternoon to give William and Kate some time alone. George and Charlotte were excited about the unexpected trip with Grandma, but Louis seemed tired and asked if he could stay home instead. Kate's heart clenched, hearing her sick child say he was too tired for a simple trip to the park. After Carol left with George and Charlotte and Louis went upstairs for a nap, William and Kate sat together in their private sitting room. The silence between them was heavy with shared grief and fear. Kate finally spoke first, asking William what they were going to do. How were they going to tell their families? How were they going to protect Louis from the media if word got out about his condition? How were they going to stay strong for him when they felt like falling apart? William did not have answers to any of those questions. He'd been trained from birth to handle difficult situations and public crises, but nothing had prepared him. For this, his son was sick with a rare disease that might not respond to treatment. The future King of England felt completely powerless to protect his own child from an enemy he could not see or fight. Kate began crying again, and William moved to sit beside her on the couch. He put his arms around her and they held each other. While they both cried, for the first time since receiving the diagnosis, they allowed themselves to feel the full weight of their fear and sadness. They cried for their innocent son, who would have to endure medical treatments and uncertainty. They cried for themselves and the helplessness they felt. They cried for the normal childhood Louis might never have. The afternoon passed slowly. Tried to do some work in his study, but could not concentrate on anything. Kate wandered around the palace, unable to sit still. She found herself in Louis's room, touching his toys and clothes as if she could somehow protect him by being close to his things. The medical information from Dr. Peterson swirled in her mind. She had memorized every word the doctor had said, still could not fully believe this was happening to their family. When George and Charlotte returned from the park with Carol, they were full of energy and stories about their adventure. George had seen a man juggling in the park and Charlotte had fed ducks at the pond. Their innocent happiness was both comforting and painful for William and Kate to witness. These two children were healthy and carefree while their brother faced an uncertain future. Louis came downstairs for dinner looking pale and tired from his afternoon nap. He ate very little, despite Kate's gentle encouragement to try just a few more bites. After dinner, the family usually played games together or watched a movie, but tonight Louis said he was too tired and wanted to go to bed early. William carried his son upstairs and tucked him into bed, trying to memorize every detail of Louis's sleepy face. That evening, after all three children were asleep, William and Kate sat in their bedroom trying to make sense of everything that had happened. They needed to start making plans. Louis would begin treatment the following week, which meant hospital visits several times each week. They would need to coordinate their royal duties around his medical schedule. More importantly, they would need to find ways to help Louis cope with the treatments and side effects. Kate worried about how to explain the situation to George and Charlotte. They were old enough to notice that something was wrong, but too young to fully understand a complex medical condition. She and William agreed that they should tell the children that Louis was sick and needed medicine to feel better, but they would not share all the frightening details about the genetic disease. The hardest part was not knowing what the future would hold. Dr. Peterson had been honest about the uncertainty surrounding Louis's condition. Some children with this disease responded well to treatment and lived relatively normal lives. Others did not respond to any of the available treatments and became very sick. There was no way to predict which group Louis would fall into until they tried the medications. William looked at Kate, lying beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling. Neither of them would sleep much tonight. Tomorrow they would have to start the difficult process of helping their son fight a disease they barely understood. Tonight, they could only hold each other and try to find strength for the battles ahead. The weight of loving a sick child felt heavier than any crown William would ever wear. 3 days had passed since the terrible news about Louis, and William could not shake the feeling of complete helplessness that consumed him. He had canceled all his public engagements and spent most of his time pacing around the palace or sitting in his private study, staring at medical research papers he had printed from the internet. Nothing he read gave him any comfort or hope. The rare genetic condition that Lewis had was still mostly a mystery to medical science. Kate had barely eaten anything since their meeting with Dr. Peterson. Ghost going through the motions of daily life, but her mind was always focused on Louis. Every time she looked at her youngest son, she saw the disease hiding beneath his innocent smile. She watched him constantly now, looking for any new symptoms or signs that his condition was getting worse. The waiting for his treatment to begin was torture. William found himself drawn to parts of the palace he rarely visited. The weight of his worry made it impossible to concentrate on work or official duties. He needed to move to keep his anxious thoughts from overwhelming him completely. That morning, after Kate had taken Louis to get some blood work done at the hospital, William decided to explore the east wing of Kensington Palace, where renovations had been planned for years, but never completed. The east wing was dusty and quiet. With rooms full of old furniture covered in white sheets, William walked slowly through the empty corridors, letting his mind wander away from the constant worry about his son. The silence was peaceful compared to the chaos of thoughts that had been spinning in his head for days. He needed this escape from the reality of Lewis's diagnosis, even if it was only temporary. As William turned a corner in the abandoned hallway, he noticed something strange. There was a large tapestry hanging on the wall that appeared to have been moved recently. Dust patterns on the wall showed that the heavy fabric had been in a different position until very recently. Behind the tapestry, William could see the edge of a wooden door that looked much older than the other doors in this part of the palace. Curiosity got the better of William's grief for a moment, pushed the tapestry aside completely, and found himself looking at a door that seemed to belong to a much earlier time period. The wood was dark with age, and the brass handle was green with oxidation. There were no markings or signs to indicate what might be behind this forgotten door. William had lived in Kensington Palace his entire adult life, but he had never seen this door before. The handle turned easily, despite its obvious age. William was surprised that the door was not locked, given how hidden and forgotten it appeared. The door opened to reveal a narrow stone staircase that curved upward into darkness. Cool air flowed down from somewhere above, carrying the scent of old wood and dust. William hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should get a flashlight or tell someone where he was going, but his need for distraction won out over caution. The stone steps were worn, smooth by centuries of use. William climbed carefully, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the way ahead. The staircase seemed to go on forever, winding upward in a tight spiral that made him slightly dizzy. His footsteps echoed in the narrow space, and he began to wonder how far up this mysterious staircase would take him. The walls were made of the same old stone as the palace foundation, but this part of the building felt much older than the renovated areas he was familiar with. Finally, after what felt like climbing 3 full floors, William reached the top of the staircase. He found himself standing in front of another wooden door, this one even more ancient-looking than the first. This door had iron hinges that looked like they belonged in a medieval castle. William pushed it open and stepped into a circular room that took his breath away. Sunlight streamed through tall, narrow windows and illuminated a space that looked like it had been untouched for decades. The circular room was clearly part of an old tower that William had never known existed within. The palace walls. The space was filled with old furniture and storage boxes, but everything was covered in layers of dust that sparkled in the sunbeams. William realized he had discovered a completely forgotten part of his own home. The room felt like stepping back in time to when the palace was first built centuries ago. What caught William's attention immediately was a large wooden chest positioned directly beneath one of the tall windows. Unlike everything else in the room, this chest looked like it had been placed there with purpose, rather than simply stored and forgotten. The chest was made of dark oak and decorated with carved designs that William recognized as royal symbols from past centuries. Most notably, there were initials carved into the lid that made his heart skip a beat. The initials carved into the chest were WA, which matched William's own initials perfectly. William Arthur was his full name, and seeing those same initials on a chest that was clearly centuries old felt like some kind of sign or message from the past. William approached the chest slowly, hardly believing what he was seeing. The coincidence seemed too incredible to be real, but there was no mistaking the carefully carved letters. The chest had a simple metal clasp that was rusted but still functional. William's hands were shaking as he reached for the clasp, wondering what he might find inside this mysterious container that seemed to be waiting specifically for him. The metal was cold under his fingers and made a soft clicking sound as it opened. William lifted the heavy wooden lid and peered. Inside, holding his breath, the inside of the chest was lined with faded red velvet that had once been rich and luxurious. Lying on the velvet were several bundles of papers tied with ribbons that had faded to pale pink with age. There were also leather-bound books and what appeared to be official documents with royal seals still attached. Everything in the chest looked very old, but had been carefully preserved as if someone had intended for these items to be found someday. William picked up the first bundle of papers with trembling hands. The paper was yellowed with age, but the ink was still clearly readable. As his eyes focused on the elegant handwriting at the top of the first page, his heart began to race. The letter was addressed to His Royal Highness Prince William and dated 1923. William could hardly believe what he was seeing. Someone with his exact name had lived in this palace almost exactly 100 years ago. William's hands trembled as he carefully unfolded the first letter from the bundle. The paper was so old and delicate that he was afraid it might crumble at his touch. The handwriting was formal and elegant in the style of the early 1900s. As William began to read the words on the page, his eyes grew wider with each sentence. The letter was from a royal physician named Dr. Harrison, and it was addressed to Prince William Arthur, who had lived in Kensington Palace in 1903. The letter began by discussing the health condition of a young prince who was experiencing mysterious symptoms that sounded exactly like what Louis was going through now. William read the words twice to make sure he was not imagining things. The doctor described a 6-year-old royal child who was suffering from extreme fatigue, dizzy spells, and episodes of fainting. The similarities to Louis's condition were so exact that William felt chills running down his spine. William set the first letter aside and picked up another one from the same bundle. This letter was also from Dr. Harrison, but it was dated several months later. The tone was much more hopeful than the first letter. The doctor wrote about a breakthrough in treating the young prince's condition. He had discovered that the child was suffering from a rare blood disorder that affected the royal bloodline. More importantly, the doctor had developed a treatment that was showing remarkable success. As William continued reading through the letters, he began to understand that he had stumbled upon medical records from nearly 100 years ago. The young prince described in these letters had the exact same genetic condition that Louis had just been diagnosed with. The doctor's letters detailed symptoms, treatments, and progress notes that could have been written about Louis yesterday. Instead of a century ago, the third letter in the bundle contained information that made William's heart race with excitement. In disbelief, Dr. Harrison wrote about a special medicine that he had created specifically for treating this rare royal blood condition. The treatment involved a combination of natural herbs and early pharmaceutical compounds that worked together to strengthen the child's immune system and improve his blood function. Most incredibly, the doctor reported that the young prince had made a complete recovery after 6 months of treatment. William carefully set the letters aside and reached for one of the leather-bound journals in the chest. The journal belonged to Dr. Harrison and contained detailed notes about his research and treatment of royal family members. The pages were filled with medical observations written in the same elegant handwriting as the letters. William found the section about the young prince and began reading the detailed treatment protocol that had saved the child's life. The treatment described in the journal was surprisingly advanced for its time. Dr. Harrison had somehow understood that this genetic condition required a very specific approach that combined traditional herbal remedies with new medical discoveries. The journal contained exact measurements and instructions for preparing the medicine, along with careful notes about how the young prince had responded to each phase of treatment. What amazed William most was how similar the symptoms and progression described in the journal were to what Louis was experiencing. The doctor had documented everything from the child's initial fatigue and dizzy spells to more serious episodes of fainting and weakness. But the journal also showed how these symptoms had gradually improved with proper treatment, Until the young prince was completely healthy again. William found another bundle of papers in the chest that contained correspondence between Dr. Harrison and other medical experts at that time period. These letters showed that the doctor had been working with physicians in other countries too. Understand this rare genetic condition better. The international medical community of the 1920s had been very interested in Dr. Harrison's successful treatment, and several other royal families had requested his help for similar cases. One letter that particularly caught William's attention was from a German physician who had treated a young member of European royalty for the same condition. The German doctor confirmed that Dr. Harrison's treatment approach was the only successful method they had found for this specific genetic disorder. The letter mentioned that without proper treatment, children with this condition rarely lived. Past their 10th birthday, William felt a mixture of hope and urgency. As he continued reading through the historical medical documents, here was proof that Louis's condition could be successfully treated, but the methods described in these century-old papers were completely different from what modern doctors were planning to try. The question was whether Dr. Harrison's treatment approach could still work today, or if medical science had moved beyond these old methods. The final item in the chest was a leather portfolio that contained what appeared to be official medical reports. These documents had royal seals and signatures from palace officials, confirming that the young prince had been declared completely healthy after Dr. Harrison's treatment. There were also letters from the prince's parents expressing their gratitude to the doctor for saving their son's life. William sat back in the dusty chair and tried to process everything he had discovered. The coincidences were too remarkable to ignore. A prince with his exact name, living in the same palace, had faced the identical medical crisis that William and Kate were dealing with now. Not only that, but this historical case had a successful outcome thanks to a brilliant doctor who had developed an effective treatment. The question that consumed William's thoughts was whether any of this historical information could help Louis today. The medical treatments described in Dr. Harrison's notes were nearly 100 years old. Modern medicine had advanced dramatically since the 1920s, but perhaps there were elements of the old treatment that could be adapted or combined with current medical knowledge. William carefully gathered all the papers and journals from the chest. He needed to get these documents to Kate and to Louis's medical team as quickly as possible. Even if the historical treatment methods were outdated, the information about how this genetic condition had been successfully treated in the past might provide valuable insights for modern doctors. As William prepared to leave the secret room, he felt something he had not experienced since receiving Louis's diagnosis. For the first time in days, he felt genuine hope instead of just fear and helplessness. These documents might hold the key to saving his son's life. The discovery felt like a miracle, or perhaps a message from his royal ancestors, who had faced the same terrible challenge and found a way to overcome it. William took one last look around the circular room before heading back down the narrow stone staircase. He was carrying precious historical documents that might change everything for his family. The hidden room had given him exactly what he needed most. Not just information about Louis's condition, but hope that his son could be saved. William rushed down the stone staircase as fast as he safely could, while protecting the precious documents he had found. His heart was pounding with excitement and hope for the first time since Louis had been diagnosed.
How about the bundle of letters?
And journals felt like they weighed nothing in his arms, even though he knew they contained information that could save his son's life. Every step brought him closer to sharing this incredible discovery with Kate. When William burst through the door of their private sitting room, Kate looked up from where she was sitting on the couch reading one of Louis's favorite storybooks. She had been trying to distract herself while waiting for William to return from wherever he had disappeared to that morning. The expression on William's face immediately told her that something important had happened. His eyes were bright with an emotion she had not seen since before the diagnosis. William spread the historical documents across the coffee table in front of Kate with trembling hands. He was speaking so quickly that his words tumbled over each other as he tried to explain what he had discovered in the hidden room. Kate stared at the yellowed papers and leather journals, not immediately understanding what William was trying to tell her. The documents looked very old and official, but she could not see how century-old papers could possibly help their son. William sat down beside Kate and picked up Dr. Harrison's first letter. He read it aloud slowly, so Kate could hear every word about the young prince who had experienced the exact same symptoms as Louis. As William continued reading through the medical correspondence, Kate's expression changed from confusion to amazement to overwhelming hope. The similarities between the historical case and Louis's condition were impossible to ignore. Kate reached for one of Dr. Harrison's journals with shaking hands. She found the pages where the doctor had recorded the young prince's recovery, week by week. The journal showed how the child had gradually gotten stronger and healthier, until he was completely cured of the genetic condition. Kate had to read the entries twice because she could hardly believe what the words were telling her. This was proof that Louis's disease could be beaten. The couple spent the next 2 hours going through every document in the collection. They read about the special treatment that the Car Harrison had developed and how it had saved not just one royal child, but several others across Europe who suffered from the same rare genetic disorder. The treatment protocol was detailed and specific with exact instructions that had been carefully preserved for nearly 100 years. William called Dr. Peterson immediately and asked if they could meet that afternoon to discuss some new information about Louis's condition. Doctor agreed to see them at 4 o'clock, even though it was his day off. William did not want to explain over the phone that he had discovered century-old medical records that might hold the cure for his son's disease. That conversation needed to happen in person, where the doctor could examine the historical documents. Himself, Kate called her mother and asked if she could stay with the children for the rest of the day. Carol could hear the excitement in Kate's voice and agreed without asking questions. She had learned that William and Kate were dealing with something very serious regarding one of the children, and she was happy to help however she could. George, Charlotte, and Louis were told that their parents had another important meeting but would be home for dinner. The drive to the hospital felt completely different from their previous trip 3 days earlier. Instead of dread and fear, William and Kate were filled with nervous excitement and hope. They kept looking at each other and smiling. They talked about the incredible coincidence of finding these documents at exactly the moment when they needed them most. It felt like a miracle or a sign that everything was going to be okay. Dr. Peterson was waiting in his office when William and Kate arrived with their precious bundle of historical documents. The doctor looked curious as William carefully placed the letters and journals on his desk. Dr. Peterson had been practicing medicine for over 30 years, but he had never had patients bring him medical records from the 1920s to discuss a current case. As Dr. Peterson began reading through Dr. Harrison's letters, his professional skepticism gradually gave way to genuine interest. The historical doctor's observations about the genetic blood disorder were remarkably accurate for that time period. More importantly, the treatment protocol described in the journals showed a deep understanding of how to address this specific condition. Dr. Peterson was impressed by how advanced Dr. Harrison's approach had been for the early 20th century. Dr. Peterson spent over an hour carefully studying all of the documents that William and Kate had brought. He made notes about the herbal compounds and early pharmaceutical treatments that Dr. Harrison had used successfully. The doctor explained that while medical science had advanced tremendously since the 1920s, there were elements of the historical treatment that could potentially be adapted and combined with modern medical knowledge. The most exciting discovery was that several of the natural compounds mentioned in Dr. Rootson's treatment were still used in modern medicine today. The historical doctor had somehow identified plant-based medicines that current research had proven to be effective for blood and immune system disorders. Dr. Peterson believed that a modified version of Dr. Harrison's treatment combined with current medical techniques could be much more effective than the standard treatments they had originally planned for Louis. Dr. Peterson immediately contacted 2 of his colleagues who specialized in rare genetic conditions. He wanted their opinions about incorporating historical treatment methods into Louis's care plan. Both specialists were fascinated by the old medical records and agreed that the historical approach showed remarkable insight into treating this specific genetic disorder. They scheduled a meeting for the following morning to develop a new treatment protocol for Louis. William and Kate left the hospital feeling more hopeful than they had in weeks. Dr. Peterson had assured them that Louis would begin the new modified treatment within days rather than waiting. For the standard medications that might not have worked anyway, the historical documents had not only provided hope, but had actually changed their son's entire treatment plan for the better. When they arrived home that evening, Louis was playing quietly in the family room with his brother and sister. Kate picked him up and held him close, while William told the children that they had received some very good news about Louis's medicine. The little boy looked up at his parents with his innocent 6-year-old eyes and asked if the new medicine would make him feel better. William promised his son that this medicine was going to help him get completely healthy again that night. William and Kate sat together in their bedroom looking through the historical documents one more time. They still could hardly believe that William's desperate need for distraction had led him to discover exactly what their family needed most. The hidden room had been waiting for almost a century to reveal its secrets at the perfect moment. It was going to be saved by a treatment that had been used to cure a royal prince with the same name as his father 100 years earlier in the very same palace, where they now lived.